still the conversation, and we have another interesting discuss here today. The Omonile and Ajagungbale are indigenous names for land grabbers, and to curb their activities and protect property rights, the Lagos State government established the State Properties Protection Law of 2016. And now to understand some key provisions of the law and some land grabbing practices or activities, Caroline Egege is a legal practitioner and she's here to educate us. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Adebimpe. Thank you, Joy.
Now first, let's understand this land grabbing. Can you explain what it is and why it has become, prevalent here in Lagos State?
Well, land grabbing, from the English connotation, is the forceful use of, forceful takeover of a land that doesn't belong to you. That's just it in the simplest terms. And the reason why this land grabbing issue has become a menace in Lagos is probably because Lagos happens to be the economic nerve center. Everybody wants a piece of the earth in Lagos State because of the financial benefits that we accrue to you. And then again, maybe because of the high rise in unemployment. So the Omoniles, the Yoruba interpretation or the English interpretation of the Yoruba word is sons of the land. So a lot of them who are not employed have seen this as an employment means for them. So it's like a livelihood. Just the way you and I have gone to our various places of work this morning, some persons have seen this thing as a trade, and that's what they do for a living. So that is why it has become a threat.
But in the situation where Lagos State has, established a law, prohibiting this, what are the main provisions, of this law? Okay,
well, even before the Lagos State enacted the Properties Protection Law of 2016, the Land Use Act 2004, which was formerly referred to as, the Decree of 1978, had provisions to curb this menace. However, curbing a threat lies mostly on enforcement. So some of the main provisions of the Properties Protection Law of 2016, which came about as a result of the increasing threats of this land grabbing, one of the key provision is Section 2. Section 2 of the 2016 Properties Protection Law of Lagos State, that's made provision for, or it's against forceful entry or forceful takeover, and then it prescribes a fine of 5 million naira or 5 years imprisonment, or even both, to anyone who falls short of that particular provision. And then you have several other provisions. You have Sections 4, which also makes it a criminal offense for you to go and take over a property that is not yours, and it also prescribes a fine or an imprisonment. But the issue we see most at times is that a lot of persons, even investors, are not even aware of this law, not to talk of the key provisions for their protection. So what you hear most times is Omoniles, 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 and a lot of people do not know that there are provisions for their protection.
So talking about how, so this, from what you've said, it shows that people are not aware. So how do we begin to get people enlightened, to know about these laws?
Thankfully, there are discourse like this one that we're having now. So one thing, or some of the things we must begin to do, is to increase the numbers of this discourse. When we discuss things like this, for anyone who comes across it, even maybe live now or later in YouTube or any other platform, they begin to get enlightenment. And those who are not privileged to even see it on TV or on social media, perhaps a family member or one person or the other would tell them that there was something like this that was discussed, and I think maybe you should make reference to that now that you are having this situation. Because the issue of land grabbing, one way or the other, every one of us has experienced it. Is either maybe your father bought a land and at the time you want to develop it, someone has encroached on it, because land grabbing is in various forms. It can be by way of encroachment. That is, a part has been taken, not fully. It can be the forceful takeover of the entire land. It can be through these notorious activities of asking you money for decking, money for roofing, or when you are bringing sand into the community. So this atrocity is in diverse form. Is in diverse forms. So every one of us, one way or the other, have been a victim of this notorious, acts that we are discussing today. And the only way we can begin to eradicate it, even if there are provisions of the law to that effect, is if we are enlightened enough. And not just being enlightened, is if we take, steps, because you must report the task force. There's a task force for the actualization of this 2016 law in Lagos State. So you must report by way of petition, to that task force that this is what is happening. But you see, a lot of people will leave it for God. That's the language. So thereby empowering these notorious elements.
I like what you said. Most of these victims will rather leave it for God, because in the past, or in some previous occurrences, they would report even to the task force, and these land grabbers are usually not punished because there's a higher authority, somewhere that is backing them, and even if they report, nothing is being done. So how much of this awareness can be done, and how can the enforcement be more what's it called, effective?
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. The issue of man oh man in Nigeria has been, since time immemorial. So the only thing we can do differently, and which I think this current administration is doing, is to, put in checks in place. Now the law is there. First and foremost, you must be aware of your rights before you can even take or lay hold of them. What you are not aware of, you cannot rely on it. So now that the law is there, how do we make enforcement effective? That is the question. Now, the issue of you calling somebody to, maybe when an Omonile is called, he or she, they are mainly he, sorry, please. So, once they are called, maybe they call in someone who is going to call another person that knows another, The only way we can begin to put checks to that is what is, happening now, the era of social media. Everybody is on social media.
You call them out on social media.
You call them out on social media. There is a level of noise that you will make that it will be impossible for you not to be noticed. So this issue of keeping quiet and leaving it and all of that should not be encouraged. So we must encourage ourselves, and then either family members or those who are related to us, because victims are relatives, So you must encourage them to speak out. Call them out, tell the world what is happening, and before you know, your voice will be heard. It's no longer we are no longer in an era where they just hush you. So things are easier now, much more than they were in the past. So it's easier. Personally, I feel it's easier for you to get justice.
Has there been any success story of
a
lot,
a lot. Particularly, there's a sister agency to this task force that we are describing, this 2016. There is the Lasrera. Yes. So now, a lot of victims of these fraudulent real estate practices, land grabbing, speculations, and all of that, they've cried out. And day in, day out, these agencies and task force have been able to settle a lot of issues. As at February this year, we saw that 7,500 petitions have been gotten by the task force. 7,500 in Lagos alone. We are not speaking outside our jurisdiction. So for 7,500 persons to have brought in petition, it means that the seat is hot. And what Lasrera is doing, that one too is helping to curb all these menace. At least now that if you grab somebody's land, if you take over somebody's land forcefully, there's an agency that you are going to have to deal with. And the agency is even now working in collaboration with EFCC. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot.
let's look at this case. I get a land.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm not ready to build. And, I say, okay, later. Then what are the steps I need to take, in order to protect myself and, of course, protect that land from land grabbing or land grabbers?
Yeah, thank you very much. There are many measures that you should take. First and foremost, the issue of getting a land and not having immediate use for it is even a recipe for trouble. Because when a place is vacant, it has to be occupied. Yeah. And that
but I've paid for it and I have documents, to back it.
Okay. Well,
look at the way she said, okay, you're speaking English.
honestly, we're going to come to that. The thing is, if a place is unoccupied, it has to be occupied. For those who are, for those of us, at least every one of us belong to one faith or the other. I, for one, I'm a Christian. Now, they said if a place is empty, the demon will go and gather more demons and come and occupy. So even the Holy Book says it. So if a place is vacant, somebody is going to have to come and occupy that place. So what you should do as a wise real estate investor, because most times I do personal webinars. I teach webinars. I have an ebook to this effect of what we are discussing, What I advise is, first and foremost, make sure you fence off your land. Okay. Fence off your land, take possession. But what we see a lot of investors do is they just leave it to fallow. That is a bush. And if it's a bush and someone comes in and clears it, I don't think that person does not have need and the person is just clearing. You understand? So don't leave it as a bush. Then secondly, I like the fact that you mentioned that you have your documents. A lot of persons do not have documents. A lot of persons do not have documents. Most of the lands that are susceptible to land grabbings do not have proper documentation.
I want you to, talk more on that. How can you say you own a land without having documents?
It's possible.
How?
A lot of people do not have documents. It's not because we are on this discourse.
Did they pay for it?
They paid for it.
And they still don't have documents?
Okay. That brings us to even a nobler issue. The issue of documentation is not what is understood by a lot of people. A receipt, a purchase receipt is not a document. It's not a land document. When it now comes to proof of ownership, when you are in a legal battle, that is when you know that what you have is as useless as a tissue paper.
Okay, so we need to take some steps back to understand what it is. Yes, what documentation is.
So first and foremost, when you make a purchase of land, you are entitled to what we call a deed of assignment or an instrument of transfer. The deed of assignment in our own parlance is what we use as the instrument of transfer. And apart from you having the deed of assignment, because if I stop here now, a lot of people will say I have a deed. What you have may also not be valuable. If you just have one blue paper, or one paper that they put a blue transparent film and you feel you have documents, I'm sorry to say you might be surprised when push comes to shove. Because the thing is, when you have a deed of assignment, you must register it. If you are conversant with the tenets of the Land Use Act, every transaction that happens after 78 is supposed to be registered. You're supposed to give notice to the states, that you have interest in this land. But what we have is people have family receipts. They have one paper that they've drawn up. Some even go as they go so low as to go to business center and just print out these things, not knowing that for every transaction you have, there must be specific details peculiar to that transaction. So where you see a stereotypic document that everybody's just sharing the same document, just know that something is amiss. Because what we discussed during our transaction will not be the same thing with what I would discuss with you, So those things that we discuss are some of the things that ought to have played out in our documentation. But if you are not knowledgeable in that field, as if you don't have enough experience in property law transaction, you may not be able to give your clients what is necessary. Or if you now go to a business center, the business center, they are not lawyers. That's the reason why you need professionals. Because it's not only documents. Some people even make the mistake is after they have bought, they now invite the lawyer. That's medicine after death. Because there are some things that the lawyer ought to have told you, or some steps that you ought to have taken even before. Thank you very much, which we call due diligence. So those things, you know, they are key. So the documents you have, after today's discourse, you need to check, are they really documents for the purpose of land ownership? Because if it is not registered, if the state does not have notice, it's not a document. It's just you have something that money passed hand. That is, you gave me money for something. You collected paper. So it may not be documents.
Okay, so to pick it up from where she stopped, she bought a land and it's just there. So what do I do if I suspect that my land is targeted for grabbing?
Oh, it's been encroached.
So what are the steps that I should take?
You have, well, if you suspect, because there's the task force frowns at frivolous actions. So you have to be sure that your land has been encroached upon. And once you're sure that your land has been encroached upon, you can come by way of petition. And because of this maybe suspicion, where people are not sure, the task force makes sure that you come in with a sworn affidavit that you have verified that your land has been encroached upon, or some land grabbers are there, and that these are their names, or these are, you know, you must put some pointers to who these persons are. So suspicion alone is not enough. It does not suffice.
You need evidence.
You need evidence.
Okay, I want you to talk more about the role of legal practitioners, you know, in helping victims, you know, acquiring a land, and how they can help them, you know, reclaim their land back after it's been taken by land grabbers.
Okay, the role of legal practitioners, well,
because you mentioned that you should get the legal practitioner first before even buying the land.
The role of legal practitioners cannot be overemphasized. For anything bordering on contracts, you must have a second eye, because, and that is where the lawyer comes in. The lawyer is actually your primary eye for any transaction, whether it borders on land or any other contract. But in this case, we're talking about land. So you need a lawyer at the onset of every transaction to first and foremost advise you on whether or not you should actually be making that purchase. Because it's not every land that you are interested in that is suitable or that is fit for purchase. So it is only the lawyer that can tell you that, because he or she has been trained to carry out this due diligence in the right MDAs. Because like I said, every transaction is unique. So sometimes when you call in a lawyer, the way the lawyer carried out due diligence for Mr. Lagbaja may not be the same way she will carry out due diligence for Madam Susie. Do you understand? Because the lands are different. So the issues bordering on them is what will necessitate the amount of due diligence that the lawyer will do. So sometimes clients will come and they'll be like, maybe a friend of theirs did due diligence on a particular figure. Why is their own different? It depends on the brief. It depends on what you've told the lawyer. So the way and manner the lawyer helps is they help at the onset. That they tell you whether or not you should go on with the transaction. And if at all they now give you green lights to go on with the transaction, they also help you in terms of documentation. And that documentation is key, because the legal practitioner will draft as if he or she is anticipating a lawsuit. So because what we see is people going to business center or people wanting to pick people's brain, they ask you question, later they put 2 and 2 together. That's a risk in itself. No matter how minute the information is, the lawyer has been trained to put that information in place for you. And the way you couch it as a layman will not be the same way the lawyer will couch it. As minute as is and an or is, it can bring in or import a whole new meaning into a phrase.
So there's some legal terms, you know, there's some terms that will be used in some documents that it is only the legal practitioner that can interpret it correctly.
Exactly. And it is only the legal practitioner that can use the right wordings. putting in mind the peculiarities of that transaction.
Okay, still talking about land grabbing, how can the legal community now, support the enforcement of anti-land grabbing laws?
Well, it's true enlightenment. One is true enlightenment. I mentioned earlier that I do webinars. I do enlightenments.
But that's on a private.
Apart from that's one.
Okay.
Now, the larger body, the Nigerian Bar Association, we have a conference coming up soon. These are the things we discuss, but it's just that we are in an era where a lot of people are not really keen on information, maybe because the informations are too much. But I can assure you that if you are able to go online and just put in anything you want, if you ask questions online now, you will have answers, enough answers that will lead you towards your solution. It may not give you the exact solution that you want, but it will give you a blueprint to what you are seeking. And that is what I feel is the most important. And then lawyers too. The property protection law that I made mention of also have a provision, against lawyers and other professionals who aid who aids the practice of land grabbing. So as someone who has schooled for, maybe like 7 years or more, you wouldn't want you to lose your license, your practicing license. So the lawyers, they have something at stake. So a lot of them would not want to be caught in this web. So, and then again, lawyers too, they take our time to advise their clients, but our rules are advisory. You cannot force your clients. So some of those clients who have, an interest, because the investors too are also corporates, because you can tell an investor may know that this land is not free, but he or she has something in mind and will now go and employ the services of these unscrupulous elements. So that's why investors too, we talk to investors, which are our clients or individuals, why they must not engage in such sharp practice. Because even if, like we see in, we see currently now with the Ministry of Environment,
of Property Rights and Land Grabbing in Lagos State, can it be eradicated, completely?
Well, I can't say eradicated completely, but it can be curtailed to its barest minimum. And I believe that with the measures we currently have on ground, we are set to achieve that. Because, when we were discussing earlier, we talked about documentation. So the Lands Bureau has recently digitalized its processing. It's still an infant project, so a lot is still shaking. But I believe that by the time everyone in the ministry gets a hang of it, that the processing will be faster. And that in turn will, permit me to use the word, it will ginger, it will motivate a lot of people who have kept their documents to bring it out and go and register. Because sometimes some people will be like the hurdles, the bureaucratic neck and all of that, because you move from one desk to another. Because the project is still at its infancy stage, you may not be seeing the desired results now. But in the long run, what I see is, better registration process, better auditing of land records. Because if you have a land and you have registered it, that is, the state has record, someone who is an unsuspecting purchaser will have records, would have access to those records, and he or she will not part with money. So the incidence of land grabbing will be reduced to the barest minimum. But for the eradication, I can't speak on that.
So fingers crossed then.
We can only hope.
We can.
Okay, just before she goes, I want you to lay emphasis again, before you purchase the land, what are the things you must do to avoid stories that touch?
Okay. Before you purchase a land, especially in Lagos State, because like I said, Lagos State is where it is the hottest. this land grabbing issue, and that is because the earth is not enough and everybody wants to have a piece of Lagos State, which is not available. So that is why you see a lot of these sharp practices. Before you buy your land, do your due diligence thoroughly. Make sure you are engaging the services of a professional, in this regards a lawyer. Make sure you engage the services of a lawyer. Then thirdly, make sure that the necessary documents that you need to have as a purchaser are already available as at the point of discussing purchase.
What are these necessary documents?
You know, for you to pass on ownership to another person, you must have proof of ownership. And in, you know, the one that many people know about is the certificate of occupancy. Yes, C of O. And that is from, you know, the Tenants of the Land Use Act, which I referred to earlier. Now, that act, apart from the C of O, because we are in the profession, or we are on the field, we know that it is not only C of O that gives you title. Because once you have a C of O as an initial purchaser, there can be no other C of O on that same parcel of land. What you now have in subsequent transaction is a consent of the governor. That means you have given the states notice that power has changed hands. That is, ownership has changed hands.
That's what they call governor's consent.
That's what we call governor's consent. So the governor must consent to the transaction. So for instance, if you, Adebimpe, has bought a land previously, and you now want to transfer to Joy, Joy has to, because you have a C of O already, you have to pass on that C of O, which is the mother document, to Joy, and Joy has to give the states notice that I am now the new owner. And what the state will in turn give to Joy is called governor's consent. That is, I have agreed to this transaction.
What if the original owner
misplaced the C of O?
No, is late and did not, you know, put any document. Okay, let's say a late mother is passing on property to her daughter or to her children, and she didn't do that, you know, with documents. What happens?
Well, this is where the issue of probates comes in.
Okay.
But a lot of people are not knowledgeable in that regards. That someone passed on does not just
she said it that, okay, when I die, you know, my daughter or my son can have this property, you know, and is known within the family. But there's no document to.
Okay, I still emphasize on the reason why people should know a bit about probates. When someone passes on, whether the person said it orally, in as much as the person did not put it in a document, which is called a will, you have to obtain early what we call letters of administration. Because when you obtain the letters of administration from the states, you would have paid tax on whatever that was left behind. So that's shows, or that's an evidence that, okay, this land belongs to so woman, but the woman has passed now, and the people who are now administering the estate of that woman, remember, is still the estate of the deceased. So you are just an administrator, that is, you're just a beneficiary taking. So the owner still remains even in debts. Okay. So that the fact that the mother left the land for the daughter does not just automatically give the daughter the free will or the free hand to just enter and do as you like. You must have something that backs you from the state. Why in this aspect, probates early letters of administration.
Okay, Caroline, thank you so much.
I don't think we can exhaust this today.
This discussion today.
It's very, it's been an insightful one, and we hope we can have you again some other time, you know, to educate us.
It will be my pleasure.
To educate us on this matter. But Caroline Egigi has been talking about legal framework and land grabbing practices. Thank you so much for joining us today on the conversation.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right, the conversation continues after this short break. Stay with us.